The BMW B58 engine has been praised for its performance and reliability. In fact, that's one of the main reasons why I got this X7, but like any engine, it's not without its issues. Let's go over the most common problems associated with this engine, symptoms, and possible fixes. Before we get started, let's quickly figure out if your car has the B58 engine. The easiest and most accurate way of telling is to decode the VIN, which will tell you exactly what you have. If you can't be bothered to do that, check out the description for years and models that have it, but generally most BMWs that have 40i in the name, such as the M240i, will have this engine. It was first launched on the F30 chassis 340i in 2015 and slowly rolled out to basically every other BMW on the market, including this X7. It even made its way to the Toyota Supra, so it just tells you how widespread this engine is. Hard to believe this engine is approaching its 10-year anniversary, but what an engine it has been. Unfortunately, some of the issues that plague the N54 and the N55 engines are still present on this engine. First one being the valve cover gasket, which starts to leak oil after hundreds of heat cycles. This won't usually be a problem for the first 50 to 60,000 miles, but I'd recommend checking for leaks at least every oil change after that. If you're wondering why hasn't BMW fixed this issue as it was super common on the previous engines, well, they have tried and to some degree slowed it down by making the engine retain more heat and dissipate it slower once shut down. That means the temperature change isn't as aggressive. While this is a common problem on the B58 engine, it isn't nearly as frequent as it used to be on the previous BMW straight 6 turbo engines. How do you know if this is an issue on your engine? Well, some of the symptoms would be the smell of burning oil, visible oil leaks around the valve cover area right here, increased oil consumption, or if you get a message on your iDrive system stating low oil. The leak isn't always on the outer perimeter, and sometimes it can be around the spark plugs, which are just right here. So if you pull a spark plug out and it's covered in oil, that's another sign. The fix for this is, of course, to replace the failed valve cover gasket with a high-quality OEM one. The cylinder head gasket goes through the same cycles, but seems to be more reliable. Unfortunately, the second most common issue on the B58 engine is excessive coolant loss, which can cause the engine to overheat and lead to the head gasket failure. Usually, these two issues go hand in hand, as most people will not notice the coolant going low. While minimal coolant losses is fine on most engines, anything more than that can cause the engine to overheat and cause a lot of damage in the process if not addressed immediately. I couldn't find a specific issue that is causing coolant loss, but more often than not, it's the radiator or the surrounding hoses or the water pump, and in rare cases, the coolant tank cap, which is located just over there. Symptoms include, as mentioned earlier, overheating and in severe cases, coolant under the car and or around the engine compartment. If the coolant is leaking inside the engine, you will see white smoke out of the exhaust and milky oil on the oil cap. This is what you want to see, just oil and no visible bubbles or white residue. Some owners have reported none of this though, yet we're still low on coolant. So very small and slow leaks are also possible, usually through this cap right here. As far as the fix, that would really depend on what is causing the leak, so you'd have to follow the trail. For white smoke or milky oil, usually the head gasket and or the other seals would have to be replaced. If there's no visible leaks, take a closer look at the coolant pump. Before we jump to the next common problem, I wanted to quickly highlight the many different variants of this engine, as some were pushed more to the limit than others from factory and had different power figures and in some cases different reliability. The B58 engine has also had a technical update in 2018, making the later version known as the B58TU with lots of improvements. The revised version improved fuel pressure by 75% with updated high pressure fuel pump and injectors. It also had an improved one-piece timing chain and a new separate cooling system for cooling the cylinder head and crankcase. Other optimizations and improvements were done to the internals as well. Overall, making it an even more reliable engine and something to consider when looking at different year cars. There was a small revision in 2022 where port fuel injection was added on top of direct injection for better emissions. No word on how this has affected reliability just yet. Anyway, the third possible issue on the B58 engine has to do with the oil pump, which is located very deep inside the engine. In the early engines, BMW used plastic components inside the oil pump, which are prone to failure. I mean, who's surprised here? Once again, due to heat cycles. The oil pump was replaced around 2021, but it's not very clear when exactly, as some engines had the metal oil pump earlier on, especially if the car was equipped with the extra cooling package. You can see the original plastic oil pump part number on the screen, as well as the upgraded metal one, so you can check for your specific car. Luckily, the failure rate on this one's fairly low, but a costly one if you're one of the unlucky ones. The major symptom is low oil pressure. This is usually a gradual failure and quite hard to troubleshoot. However, if you are buying a car with this engine or suspect that yours might be suffering from a bad oil pump, make sure the car can read oil level from the iDrive screen. The reason this is a telltale sign of a bad oil pump is simply because BMW has a very narrow range of operating parameters which will not be met if the oil pump is not working correctly, and you will not be able to measure the oil level. Super important. The fix for this one is obviously to replace the plastic oil pump with the upgraded metal one, but it is a very lengthy and expensive job. For our number 4, we have a strange one. The B58 engine uses cartridge oil filters instead of the metal encased ones, which isn't uncommon, but there have been cases where the oil filter ripped apart into multiple pieces or gets crushed. Of course, this would prevent the filter from doing its job of filtering oil and only add to the problem by sending debris into the engine. I have made a video on how to replace oil and the filter on this car, and the oil is located just right there, so it's not too difficult to get to and should not be that difficult to change. There isn't really a way to tell if this is happening without pulling the filter, which is why it's super important to do regular oil and oil filter changes so it can be inspected. In extreme cases, this could show as low engine oil pressure on the iDrive system. Fixing this one is obviously easy as long as it hasn't gone too far. Simply replace it with a good quality OEM filter and do so often. Our fifth and final common issue in this video has to do with the Vanos solenoids. BMW has been using their proprietary Vanos system to dynamically adjust valve timing for years now, but the issue seems to remain. As the rubber O-ring on the solenoid starts to deteriorate, contaminated oil starts making its way in, eventually clogging up the intricate parts inside. This is more common as the engine approaches 100,000 miles and eventually disrupts ability to actuate the Vanos solenoids and the engine to adjust valve timing correctly. Symptoms vary depending on how clogged they are, but you can expect rough idling, poor engine performance such as sluggish throttle response, and decreased efficiency. Eventually, the car will go into limp home mode to preserve the engine. The fix here is to simply replace the O-ring and clean the solenoids, or replace them completely as recommended by the dealer. This has been an issue on many previous BMW turbo engines I mentioned earlier, but at least it was an easy and mostly inexpensive fix. Unfortunately, it's not so simple on the B58 engine, as the timing chain has been moved to the rear of the engine, which means the Vanos solenoids have also been moved to the rear of the engine, making them much more difficult to access. Previously, they used to be just right here, so you would remove some shrouds and you had super easy access. Now you need special tools and in some cases probably maybe even pulling the engine just to get access to those. Crazy. I also wanted to quickly touch on the reliability of the particular B58 TU engine in my BMW X7. I got this car with about 47,000 miles and it's at 55-ish thousand right now. Luckily, I have had zero issues with anything engine related. The only issue I've had was with the electronics, but there is another video about this right here. Anyway, I pulled the Carfax for this car and there was nothing special. It was pretty much just serviced at the dealer at standard intervals and nothing extra. Since then, I have done a full service and she's been running like a dream. The engine feels healthy and has no leaks, and I'm positive it will be trouble-free at least until 100,000 miles. And while I'm aware that design flaws cannot be solved by preventive maintenance, it does help to keep the engine as happy as possible by doing regular, more often than BMW recommends, oil and oil filter changes, as well as coolant flushes at least at recommended intervals. Other recommended practices, such as not pushing the car hard until the engine is up to temperature and letting the car idle for a few seconds after a hard drive before shutting it off so the hot oil doesn't stay in the turbo, is also recommended, although modern BMWs run the coolant pump for 5 to 10 minutes after the ignition is off to cool off the turbo and other components if the car is too hot. So pretty clever engineering there. So is this BMW B58 engine really more reliable than some of the previous straight-six BMW engines, especially the N54 and the N55? Well, as you can imagine, BMW has been trying to regain their reputation as not only a fun luxury brand, but also as a reliable brand, and for the most part, they have done it. It may not sound so after watching this video, but remember that the frequency of these common issues is much lower on this engine compared to the previous ones. What really makes a difference here is that BMW, in a way, has really overbuilt this engine. Just quickly looking at the specs, we can see that it has forged crankshaft and connecting rods, coated bearings, and it uses closed deck design. That's a recipe for at least 500 horsepower, yet the most powerful B58 engine at this moment makes only 382 horsepower stock. With most brands moving towards electric, including BMW, it's nice to see that powerful and reliable, very enjoyable to drive engines still exist, and I'm hoping BMW will continue to develop this straight-six for at least another decade, and I get to drive the next iteration as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. Check out this video on my BMW X7 right here to learn about some hidden features you may not have known about this cool car, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!